All right, as I go through the fundamentals of instructing the FOIs or the FOIs, we are on Task C, Course Development, Lesson Plans, and Classroom Training Techniques. So this is a lesson on how we should be structuring a lesson and to ensure the knowledge is properly retained. So we're going to kind of go through, the 4 steps of the teaching process and then focus on the preparation, the organization, the presentation, instructional tools, and techniques that we'll need. So we'll start off with teaching. What is teaching? Well, simply to instruct or to train, which is exactly what you're going to be doing as an instructor. The teaching process is 4 different steps. So we'll organize this material to teach in a way that the learner can understand. First is the preparation. So you're going to determine the goals and objectives of whatever your particular lesson is. So my lesson right now is my goal is to teach course development, lesson plans, classroom training techniques. Next is the presentation. So the delivery of all the information through a lesson plan. Next is our application stage or step in the process, which is when the learner demonstrates their knowledge. And then last is the review. Review all the material, including an evaluation of the student's performance. So that's the process we go through for teaching anything, whether it's ground-based knowledge or flight-based, and the evaluation being staying within the ACS standards. There are 4 essential skills when it comes to the teaching process. And this is our SPAM acronym. So the first is subject matter expertise. Know your trade and possess a high level of expertise. Instructors are at their best when they know what they're talking about, so know your stuff. Next is people skills. Now this right here could be highlighted, underlined. This might be the most important essential skill on top of, of course, you want to have the baseline of knowing your craft, but people skills is really what separates poor instructors from great instructors. So as an instructor, if you want to be effective, effective instructors relate well to people and communicate effectively. Communication is what really separates an average from a great instructor. So as an instructor, you're going to be providing motivation, displaying enthusiasm for what you're talking about, detecting when learners aren't learning, and challenge learners while also supporting them in their efforts. So really push them to thrive and succeed while also supporting them and doing things like giving them positive feedback and acknowledge when they do a good job. Next is assessment skills. Assessment ensures information and skills are correctly being retained and developed. So you need to have a solid idea of what your learners' knowledge and skills are at. And we do that by assessing them. So giving them, having them perform their knowledge or display their understanding of a maneuver or procedure. And then we can assess if they're within the standards that we want. And management skills. So manage your time effectively, not only just for your sake, but for the student's sake as well. Plan, organize, and carry out professional lesson plans. All right, let's talk about the training course. So a complete series of studies that leads to a specific goal. This includes a curriculum and a syllabus and lesson plans. All right, let's talk about preparation. Lessons must be planned. You'll have objectives, procedures, facilities goals, and review and evaluation within the preparation of lesson plans. And there's a few different types of objectives. One is performance-based objectives. So these are set measurable standards that are clear and repeatable, just like the standards set within the ACS. So the objectives are clear, reasonable, measurable, and repeatable. And there are 3 elements of performance-based objectives. There's the description, conditions, and criteria. So the description is clearly state the skill or behavior. The conditions are the rules under which that skill or behavior will be demonstrated. and the criteria, the standards to measure the accomplishment of the objective. So like the ACS standards. And we have decision-based objectives. So this is our second type of objective. Decision-based objective, here at the bottom, facilitate a higher level of learning application. So they're objectives that ask the student to make real-world decisions. So, it's useful to have decision-based objectives when you're teaching a difficult subject like risk management or aeronautical decision-making, and it promotes higher level of learning. All right, so how do we organize our material? First, we have an introduction. So we organize the material into the IDC acronym, Intro, Development, Conclusion. And within the intro, we have an acronym for what goes in the intro, which is AMMO. So kind of think about what do I need to get this lesson? Well, I need ammo. I'm going to start off the lesson with ammo. AMO for attention, motivation, and overview. So attention, start with a story or a joke or something that gets the learner's attention. Motivation, give a specific reason why the information is important. Give a reason for that student to engage with that material. If you need to, relate that information to their ultimate aviation goal and let them know how that particular lesson will help them get to their goal. Because at the end of the day, flight training is just a means to an end. No one wants to be in flight training. They want to have their license and do what they want to do with their license. So give them a reason to go through flight training so that they should have a reason to engage with the material. And last is an overview, just giving a general outline of what's going to be covered, key ideas and objectives. Now, that was just the introduction within the IDC acronym. The D is development. So this is the main points, main part of the lesson that organizes the material into, organize the material in a logical way in one of the following ways. So it could be past to present, simple to complex, known to unknown, most frequently used to least frequently used. If I'm talking about something historical, maybe past to present would make more sense. It doesn't make as much sense in the aviation context, but I can also talk about simple to complex. Maybe I'm talking about aircraft systems, and I'll start with the simple stuff and then move into the more complicated stuff. You can go from known to unknown, most frequently used to least frequently used. So maybe for when I'm doing an airspace lesson, I'm going to talk first about the airspace that is we most frequently use, and then list them off in the order from most frequently used to least frequently used. And that would make sense. We learned that the law of primacy states what's learned first is best retained. So if I start off a lesson talking about airspace that's most frequently used, that may be better. That would be a better way to have the student retain more of the information. And then last is our conclusion. So our conclusion, we're kind of restating important elements and relating that to the objective. It'll also aid in retaining, in learner retention by restating main points that are in the conclusion. Training delivery methods. So there's a bunch of different ways that we can deliver this information. One is through a lecture. So if you're doing a lecture, you deliver to silent participants. It's good for introducing new ideas to a lot of different people, since if everyone's able to focus on the person giving the lecture, and seemingly a lot of people can listen. The only downside of a lecture is it's easier for students to check out, and they don't have to be actively involved in the learning process, and it's really only good for introducing new ideas to a lot of people. All right, discussion. So there's also the discussion method. So you'll have a short lecture followed by an active discussion. And this is great because a discussion usually everyone within the discussion needs to have some level of knowledge about the topic. But if you do the discussion method, then you can have a short lecture. Then people all have a bit of understanding on the topic, and then follow that up with the discussion. So giving the benefits of a lecture and a discussion in one. So this is a great way to do your own lessons to students. And there's a guided discussion. So again, a learner needs to have some level of knowledge of the topic to be discussed, and the instructor acts as a facilitator and is maintaining the control and direction of the conversation. Next is cooperative learning. So cooperative learning or group learning is when small groups work together to maximize understanding. Like flight instructing, the CFI trainings in this method. You're working with the student in order to maximize understanding. So students work with their instructor, and it requires active student participation. Next, we have the demonstration performance method. So information is given in a lecture and then demonstrated in the plane. So for best mastery of mental or physical skills that require practice, we'll use the demonstration performance method. So if let's break down the demonstration performance method. There are 5 phases. There's the explain, so that's the lecture I give to the students. So I explain, the maneuver. I demonstrate the maneuver. Then the student will perform the maneuver. The learner performs that maneuver while I'm supervising, and then we evaluate. I give feedback, and I see where they're at. And then I look at, was my explanation, were my teaching methods getting through to this student? And then I can recalibrate the way I'm approaching teaching whatever specific topic it is. So that's the demonstration performance method. Then there's the drill and practice. So this, the mind rarely retains information after just one exposure. So we drill and practice. Students will retain through, continual repetition, learn by practicing and applying what has been told and shown over and over again. Now we have computer-assisted learning or electronic learning. So any electronic learning is computer-assisted learning or electronic learning. The advantages being it's time flexible, usually cost effective when compared to getting with an instructor in person versus watching YouTube videos or buying a ground school online. Update easily, access from anywhere, self-paced. Limitations. One of those limitations could also be the advantage of being self-paced, because depending on the motivation of your student, that's either going to hold them back or going to set them ahead. So there's that lack of interaction, limited instruction. Sometimes the cost is expensive, especially for a lot of these online ground schools, and it's not in real life. So I always felt like I learned a lot as an instructor, but I honestly did most of my learning for aviation knowledge on YouTube. Computer-assisted learning is a software used as a training device. So like using Shepherd Air on my iPad is computer-assisted learning. So that helped me achieve all of my written exams. Simulation, role-playing, and video gaming. So you can practice things that would otherwise be dangerous in the workplace. So using a simulator or even using Microsoft Flight Sim on your computer. Now let's talk about instructional aids. These instructional aids is just any device that will assist the instructor in the teaching learning process. So it could be anything like a whiteboard, a video, a printout of some sort of chart or map or a model airplane, PowerPoint, whatever. It's an aid that'll assist in the teaching process. It'll help clarify relationships between objects and concepts. And a lot of times if you have a student that there is a slight language barrier, these will aid in helping you teach your student and helping them retain information that you want them to have. So you can use these to gain and hold the attention of a viewer and a learner, and it will help them visualize topics for better retention. So the guidelines for using an instructional aid is you want to clearly establish the objective, and you want to gather necessary data and organize the material. So if I know I'm going to give a lesson on the aerodynamics, I can be like, okay, I want a model plane, and I can use it in X different ways to help illustrate this point of why the aircraft has the tendency to yaw in the opposite direction of the desired bank. And so maybe this model can help me explain adverse yaw. And select ideas to be supported with the aids. All right, let's talk about problem-based instruction. Problem-based instruction is teaching by giving the learner a real-world problem that they have to solve. So effective problems relate to the real world. They're open-ended, not a single right answer. Connected to previously learned knowledge and new knowledge, and reflect lesson objectives. Maybe I'm talking about weather, and I give someone the scenario of, okay, you're in the traffic pattern and a storm is approaching. What do you do? It's very open-ended, and there's a lot that can be said about that. There's an argument to land as soon as possible. I understand if a student says, I'm worried about potential microbursts or wind shear, I'm going to land at an airport farther away and then wait for the storm to pass. It really depends on, it's such an open-ended question. Those are questions that you'll get on a check ride, on a stage check. So just think through the answer and have a good, have a reason for your answer. There's different types of problem-based learning. There's higher order thinking skills, scenario-based training, so that's that realistic scenarios, collaborative problem solving, 2 or more people working together, and then the case study method. So analyzing a real-world situation, use that to educate. So higher order thinking skills, you set up a problem, determine the learning outcomes, have the student solve the problem, reflect on their problem-solving process, consider additional solutions, because a lot of times there's more than one right answer. Evaluate the solution versus additional options and reflect on which solution is the best. So that's kind of when you give these, this problem-based instruction to students, you're going to analyze their thinking process and considering additional solutions and teaching them to have that pilot in command mentality. And this really develops aeronautical decision making. Next, we have scenario-based training. So using realistic scenarios to prompt a student to make decisions and apply their knowledge. So it's not a test. Again, there's not one right answer, but it doesn't promote errors and promotes situational awareness and the opportunity for decision making. Next is collaborative problem solving. So 2 or more people working together to solve a problem, and you helping only when needed. So if I'm, one of the big things of training new students is having them gain that pilot in command mentality. And so you really want them, by the end of their training of their private pilot license, you're not doing anything, and you're making sure that they can do every single thing. They can handle different issues that arise mid-flight. But it takes time, so you have to hold their hand a bit in the beginning and then slowly let them go throughout their training while also giving meaningful feedback. And then the case study method, so looking at real world situations that happened and learning from the mistakes that people have made in the past. Next, we have integrated flight instruction. So when we're learning or teaching maneuvers to students, we're going to teach them to fly by outside reference and by reference to the instruments. And, it's not one or the other. A lot of times it's students flying by just looking inside the aircraft. We have to fly by looking primarily outside. 90% of our vision needs to be outside, 10% inside. And we also have this see and avoid responsibility, which is why our vision needs to be outside 90% of the time. So we're not going to allow focus on the instruments to prelude the scanning and collision avoidance, because it's our responsibility to see and avoid other aircraft. You never know, even though everyone around our airport has, we're in that mode C veil, so we have ADS-BL mode C transponders. You never know if something like that, someone doesn't realize that their mode C transponder isn't working, or excuse me, their ADS-B out, so it doesn't pop up on our MFD, and all of a sudden we're on a collision course with an aircraft half a mile away that we didn't know about. So keeping our eyes outside. Now let's talk about blocks of learning. Blocks of learning are the individual skills that build upon each other to make up a total, an objective. So I have a brand new student. Their first main goal is to solo. So the solo block of learning could be, learning how to fly a rectangular course, learning the aircraft performance and limitations, airport operations, slow flight, ground reference maneuvers, airport operations, go-arounds, whatever. All these little individual blocks that eventually pile up to make the objective of a solo. And we have a training syllabus. A syllabus, which a lot of students really like to have, since most of your students are, the average age of an aviation student is 30 years old. So having adult students, for the most part, a lot of, the average adult is a lot more, self-motivating and wanting to know what's next and have a time frame and for the steps that they're going to take to meet their objective. And they're going to want to see a syllabus. So the syllabus is, a document that arranges these blocks of learning in an optimal order to achieve that set training objective, get the private pilot license. So should be flexible. Use it as a guide as an instructor. If weather's not good one day and you want to do stalls, but ceiling is good enough to stay in the pattern, you may have to skip to one lesson and come back to another, but just as long as you're guiding that student in the right direction. And flight lessons generally emphasize psychomotor domain. The affective domain is important as well, so ask your students how they feel about different topics, and include risk management into instruction. We're not going to include risk management as, one day we're learning about national airspace system. Today we're learning about aircraft systems. All right, and then today we're going to learn about risk management. That's not how that works at all. We're incorporating risk management from the onset of flight training into everything we do, because we as pilots are constantly going through the risk management process for maneuvers, choosing to make a go-around or not, choosing to make a go-no-go decision when we're flying, etc. But more on risk management in the risk management FOI lesson. Include special emphasis areas causal to accidents and incidents. So one thing we can have a special emphasis on is low, slow approaches, which a lot of time leads to stalling on short final, something like that. All right, so when we plan instructional activity in our lesson plans, we want it to be designated to ensure each learner receives the best possible instruction. So characteristics of being working document: unity, content, scope, practicality, flexibility, relation to a course of training, and instructional steps. So all our lesson plans should be every single one of these. And that is about it. I want to make sure I touched on everything. I want to also add the importance of, the ACS, the Airman Certification Standards. These are the standards that an examiner, your DPE, will look at to make sure that you're within, that you're a safe, competent pilot when they issue you a license or don't. So the ACS, it tells you exactly what's going to be in your check ride, the knowledge areas, the conditions for your maneuvers and procedures. And it's not a teaching document, it's a testing document. So that's an important point to be made there. We talked about. Yep, that's about it for task C here. Course development, lesson plans, and classroom training techniques. Thank you.